Hi, Joe O'Connell, Sandpiper Pump. Today we're going to show you how to put a wet end kit into our S05 metallic. Today we'll be using Sandpiper genuine parts. Out front we have examples of our Sandpiper wet end kit and our Sandpiper air end kit for our S05 metallic. The rebuild you're going to see is accurate in man method and machine, but for video purposes some parts of the work performed have been condensed in time. At any point during this presentation, please pause this video until you've completed any phase of the process. The pump we're using today has been built new and is considerably easier to work with than a pump that's been used in a process. Additional time may be required in the preparation and separation of parts and components during the rebuild. Identifying which kit is required for your repair has become easier on newer pumps with the permanently affixed metal serial number tag that now indicates the wet end and air end kit information for the pump. Kit information can also be found in the service and operating manual. Sandpiper genuine replacement parts, wet end and air end kits provide a bill of material of the components included in the kit. All items included in the kits are components that Sandpiper recommends replacing when rebuilding a pump. The pump we are using today is an example of the ease of kit installation. Always consult your respective service and operating manual before performing any maintenance on your pump. Service and operating manuals include composite repair parts drawings, repair parts list, and torque specifications. For service and operating manuals or more information, visit us on the web at www.sandpiperpump.com. Always remember that safety is the highest priority. When working on or around any equipment, always follow the correct safety procedures. Always read and follow the safety warnings and instructions in the service manual before any work is started on the pump. For more information, see the warm-up video on safety at sandpiperpump.com. Our wet end rebuild today will consist of diaphragms, check balls, and seats. These are the recommended tools used with the rebuild. While the sizes may change based on the model, the type will remain the same. Torque wrench, ratchet, small slotted screwdriver, needle nose pliers, sockets and or wrenches, 1/2 inch, 9/16 inch, 3/4 inch. Let's get started. For video purposes, we're going to use a 3/8 inch impact gun for assembly and disassembly. We're going to start by taking off the discharge manifold. Once you have the bolts loosened and removed, go ahead and set the discharge manifold aside. Take the seats and the check balls out. You can discard those. Flip the unit over and take the suction manifold off. Once you have those bolts loosened, you can go ahead and set the suction manifold aside. And you can discard the seats and the check balls. Now we're going to take one of the chambers off. Loosen the bolts. You have 2 blind holes on the inside there. Move the chamber, set the chamber aside, and you can loosen the diaphragm assembly. You may get the diaphragm rod to come out with the assembly. That's okay. In this case, the assembly came off of the rod. And you want to take off the other outer chamber. With the outer chamber set aside, you can remove the diaphragm rod and assembly. Next, we're going to remove the diaphragm rod from the diaphragm assembly. Today we are using a vise with soft jaws. Soft jaws are utilized to ensure that the shaft is not scarred, scratched, or damaged while it's clamped in the vise. Tighten the rod into the assembly with your soft jaws. Unthread the diaphragm assembly from the rod. You want to inspect the rod, make sure there's no deep gouges, grooves, scratches. You'll have to replace that if you find any. Remove your soft jaws from the vise. And then you want to kind of invert the diaphragm and lightly grab hold of the inner diaphragm plate. So clamp it in the vise lightly. You don't want to compress it too much. And then unthread the outer plate from the assembly. You can discard the diaphragm. Then you want to repeat the process for the opposite assembly. Once you have the assemblies apart, you can discard the old diaphragms, and you want to inspect your inner and outer diaphragm plates. Ensure the plates have no sharp edges or scarring on the radius. Plates can be cleaned up with emery paper, crocus cloth, or fine sandpaper. Replace if necessary. Go ahead and open up your wet end kit and set the components out. You want to tighten one of the inner plates into the vise. You want the cone side of the plate facing up. Lightly compress the vise onto the plate. You don't want to tighten it too much and damage the plate. Next, take our new diaphragm. On the S05 metallic, the natural bulge of the diaphragm faces against the inner plate. And then thread your outer plate through the diaphragm and into the inner plate. Then you want to torque those two together according to the torque specifications found in your service and operating manual. You want to repeat the process for the second assembly. Tighten the plate into the vise. The natural bulge of the diaphragm faces against the plate. Thread the outer plate through and then torque the assembly together. Once you get the assembly tightened, you want to go ahead and reinstall your soft jaws and tighten your diaphragm rod into the vise with the soft jaws. And you want to thread one of the assemblies onto the rod. You want to torque that onto the rod. You'll find those torque specifications in your service and operating manual. Once you have the assembly together, you want to go ahead and install the bumper. Then you want to put a light amount of grease onto the rod. And you also want to install a light amount of grease into the intermediate on the U-cup seal and the bearing. Go ahead and put the assembly into the intermediate and line up the bolt holes on the diaphragm with the bolt holes of the inner chamber. Next, we're going to install our outer chamber. You want to inspect the outer chamber. Inspect the machine faces and radius of the chamber for damage or material buildup. Scarring, scratches, or material buildup can be cleaned up by using emery paper, crocus cloth, or fine sandpaper. Ensure the radius on the inside of the chamber is maintained during cleanup. Replace the chamber if necessary. When aligning the outer chamber, be sure that the discharge port faces the nameplate. Thread your bolts in. Make sure you tighten all the bolts down in a crossing pattern. Next, we're going to flip the unit over. I'm going to go ahead and install the bumper and thread your second diaphragm assembly down onto the rod. And you want to torque that. When torquing, if you do not achieve hole alignment on the torque, you always want to go forward with the diaphragm. You want to continue tightening until you achieve hole alignment. You never want to go backwards. Once you have the holes aligned with the inner chamber, reinstall the second outer chamber. Remember to inspect the second outer chamber. Inspect the machine faces and radius of the chamber for damage or material buildup. Scarring, scratches, or material buildup can be cleaned up by using emery paper, crocus cloth, or fine sandpaper. Ensure the radius on the inside of the chamber is maintained during cleanup. When aligning the outer chamber, be sure that the discharge port faces the nameplate. Thread your bolts in and then tighten them in a crossing pattern. On the suction side, you want to drop in your check balls and install your seats. Seats have no top or bottom. They can be installed in either direction. Next, we're going to install our suction manifold assembly. We want to inspect the manifold for scarring, damage, or material buildup. Check the casting for wear. Check the port for thread integrity. Repair or replace as needed. Orientation of the manifold is based on process requirements and may be reinstalled in either direction. You want to thread the bolts in. You want to tighten them down. Once you get them tightened down, you'll see that there is a gap between the suction manifold and the discharge manifold. This is okay. Flip the unit over and we're going to go ahead and install our discharge seats and our discharge check balls. Take the discharge manifold assembly. Orientation of the manifold is based on process requirements and may be reinstalled in either direction. There are two bolts. The shorter bolts go on the inside. The longer bolts go on the outside. Tighten all 8 bolts down in a crossing pattern. There will be a gap between the outer chamber and the elbow. This is not a defect, it's okay. You will not be able to compress the elbow to the outer chamber with a face-to-face connection. That completes our wet side rebuild of our S05 metallic. If you're doing a complete rebuild, you'll want to see our air side video also. Or for additional information, find us on the web at sandpiperpump.com or contact after sales support at service.warrenrupp@idexcorp.com. Thank you.